What's going on, everybody? Culturedog Sam Hatch back here in the sweat box, sitting in July. I didn't want to put the AC on to blow your eardrums out, but it has been, a little bit toasty lately. Hopefully everybody had a great 4th weekend. It was pretty awesome in my neck of the woods. But yeah, I meant to sit down and talk about this last week, but last Tuesday night, I went to go see Midsommar, and it's definitely not a stretch of the imagination to say that this was one of the biggest, movies that I was expecting to be released this year. And yeah, having fallen in love with Ari Aster's Hereditary, I was psyched to see him returning again to the horror-ish fold, even though this shares some commonalities with Hereditary, but it's got its own kind of distinct vibe to it. But yes, I love slow burn kind of twist the knot, like keep tightening up ratcheting up the tension until you reach your breaking point. I love those kind of movies, and this is one of them, and obviously owes a huge debt of gratitude to folk horror films, and particularly The Wicker Man. So there's the expectation going in, as opposed to Hereditary, where there was a lot of misdirection in the advertising on purpose and a question of what was going on there. Whereas this one, with a history of film already establishing that communes in Europe, particularly, are cinematically not a great place for a protagonist to go. You, as an audience member, come at a film like this, already knowing and or expecting certain things. So, in some regards, it's a bit predictable, but that's not a slight against it in this case, because that's part of what's intended on the filmmaker's part. Like, Ari Aster expects you to come to this movie with a knowledge of The Wicker Man and being a fan of that and wanting to see something different. If you haven't run across it before or seen the trailer, which a lot of people haven't because it was hilariously a group of older ladies sitting next to my wife who just went in, apparently not looking at the poster and realizing that the woman is crying and seems to be in some sort of distress on it, and they thought it was going to be some sort of delightful celebration of Swedish heritage, and they were slightly disturbed by it. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's about a character played by Florence Pugh who is completely grief-stricken and is unable to cope and is trying to deal with college at the same time, and her support system is largely derived of a boyfriend who selfishly sees the situation from his own perspective, which is a perspective that isn't really that caring for her needs and her emotional support, and he has his own group of friends that he would rather spend time with, because his girlfriend's a big hot mess, and there's an impending breakup that's going to happen, but tragedy forces that to be stalled in a very realistic scenario. I mean, the early on scenario is a bit out there and outlandish, but that scenario in which a relationship that's doomed to fail ends up being prolonged far longer than necessary because of some sort of external forces, like a death in the family or something to that effect. So he and his group of friends, one of them includes a Swedish fellow who wants to go back to his small hometown in the summer, and there's this giant festival that only happens every 90 years, so it's this huge thing. So he invites his friends to join him on the festival, and then whether or not she will come along is a bone of contention, and it's all established very, very smartly, and it's written very honestly and uncomfortably for anyone that's ever been in those kind of situations. Hereditary dealt with grief in a kind of snowballing effect, and there was a cumulative amount of grief. Like, there's a certain amount of grief that one could live with in the beginning that just keeps getting worse and worse throughout. Whereas this one, it just goes for a quick punch to the solar plexus with some extremely disturbing imagery, and it really establishes, and kudos to everybody, especially Florence Pugh, for having to power through this kind of performance, because it's tough to sell, and it's really, really just harrowing stuff, and you immediately grasp that this is something one doesn't easily come back from. This isn't a flash forward to 6 months later and you're feeling great. But the one kind of bit of solace perhaps in the future is this trip to Sweden. So it quickly, smartly transplants these characters into Sweden, and from that point on, you, the viewer, are expecting things to take a particular turn, and it's more in the regards of like how that is going to play out that keeps you on the edge of your seat. And there's this, feeling of dread almost immediately. Like Will Poulter is in it from Son of Rambo and We're the Millers, and he's a super kind of outgoing, energetic American doofus type character, and he's excited to go find some ladies in Stockholm. And right away you get this sense, like they land and they're immediately driving 4 hours to the next destination. So there's that sense that they're completely at the mercy of this Swedish friend of theirs and the village they go to. So yeah, I've got Swedish heritage in my family. My mom's side is 100% Swedish, so it was cool. I was into it already. I'm like, yeah, this is what the St. Lucia Festival is really like. We're gonna do some crazy stuff. But yeah, so it's a horror film that is shot largely in broad daylight, because not only is it set during the summer, it's also taking place in the land of the midnight sun, so it does get a little bit dim at certain times, but for the most part it is just non-stop glaring bright daylight. And there's been some cool horror films in recent years that have pulled off some scares in daylight. Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell, and a small pile of them, but it's not impossible. But it definitely, it takes a little bit more. It takes a little bit of skill to build a sense of dread and foreboding, and this does. And it's got these characters that you as a viewer are ready to scream at them to just turn around and go home. There's a lot of drug use early on, and things begin becoming a little just bit bizarre and strange. But again, in a situation where these characters are fish out of water characters, they're trusting in their friend. Some of them actually have a motivation to stick around in order to work up a thesis, and they're just so wrapped up in their own kind of inner struggles and competitions between certain characters that it certainly makes sense that they would stick around and maybe miss some of the clues. And that's the thing, if we're fans of semiotics, you're going to love this thing, because it's just laden with all sorts of folkloric clues. I mean, it starts off with a very Beauty and the Beast-esque tapestry moment, and then as the film progresses, it keeps dropping all these little clues, and occasionally a character will comment on it and just have it written off. The people in this village are using the kind of outlook on all these strange elements that a foreigner would have, using that as an excuse to write it off. When you, the viewer, think, well, maybe that has a little bit more import than anybody is admitting to right now. And then there's like a strange kind of tapestry mural that you see, which if you follow it as the camera pans along it, you can kind of gain some foreshadowed knowledge of some of the plot points that comes later on. But it's really about this, this pressure cooker of these characters that all have some sort of problems going on, or some sort of, either it's ignorance or jealousy, competition, or being incapable of moving on past grief. And it's all of this going on, and not really taking into consideration that much the vibe of what this festival is all about. But it's going to be 9 days, so it when it turns weird, they're in this weirdness for the long haul. And Ari Aster does a great job at establishing a realistic situation where maybe some characters would be like, oh, hell no, I'm getting out of here. And then some others would maybe see the side of the villagers, because everything is explained, and there is some brutal stuff that happens. It's Cronenbergian in a way. When some of the really grisly violence happens, it's very unflinching, in your face stuff, and you get to just look at the atrocities as they're unfolding, and everyone is celebrating it. That's this kind of disturbing element. So it's not just a redo of The Wicker Man. It does have this continually growing feeling that a lot of characters are getting in over their heads, and they should be paying a little more attention. They should be a little bit more respectful of what's going on. But it's got its own tactic. And it also reminded me a lot of Ty West's The Sacrament, which I loved up until the point when I realized that had the same kind of sense of building dread and characters not realizing the predicament they were in until it was too late, that sort of thing. I loved it until I realized it was just a retelling of the Jim Jones Guyana Massacre, and I thought that was going to be using that as a template to deliver something else. It doesn't have to be supernatural. And this film, I'm not going to really say whether there is any supernatural dealings or not. But it doesn't have to be, as long as there's some sort of little twist. And there was no twist. And that movie was really strangely dissatisfying because it told the exact same story essentially, but injecting some new characters into it. And they changed a bunch of names and everything. But it was rather pointless. It was like if they were going to make that close of a retelling of the Jim Jones Compound Massacre, then I don't know, they should have just told it. But anyways, I was always expecting something more, whereas Midsommar delivers, and it unfolds in some directions that you can see some company. There was like a couple things where I was like, this could go a couple different ways for different characters. But yeah, it's really intense. It's intense. It's brutal. It's something that sticks with you. You think about it the next day, which is a sign of a good horror film. Again, you need to bring something of yourself into the film. Like a lot of the best horror films, like Simple Ghost Pictures, anything like this, you need to bring. It's the same thing with a comedy. You have to be receptive in order for this exchange of energy. I never quite got there's the posturing kind of bro dude in the back of the theater that has seen one of the best horror films of all times and just exclaims, "That wasn't scary. I wasn't scary. I wasn't scared." I was like, well, yeah, because you built up a wall around yourself, either to impress somebody else or just to prove how untouchable you are. That's not anything to be proud of. That's not how these kind of films work. It's a give and take. You have to invest something into it. You can't just like roll up and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna get rich doing this thing. What are you gonna invest?" Oh, maybe $1. Guess what? You didn't earn anything back. But this other guy over here, he paid in and he's getting something paid out. It's not a mystery. Like, you have to invest something into it. And then again, there's a promise there, and I do get upset when a film quote unquote breaks the oath, like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, where it promises something, I invested in it, and the return I got was interesting, but it wasn't what I had invested in. So you do run the risk. You're vulnerable. You run the risk of not receiving back what you had invested. But when it does pay off, it's 1,000 times more rewarding. So yeah, you have to be able to put yourself in the mindset of these characters and let the sinking feeling kind of pull at you. Because if you just come in and you just drop that wall in front of you, yeah, it's just a bunch of people going on a summer vacation in Sweden, and it's not quote unquote scary. It's connecting with the subcurrents that makes it scary. And this is yet another in A24's line. Somebody was saying recently was that A24 is Miramax without the gross sexual misconduct. Knock on wood, as far as we know. But there is a unique kind of aesthetic to A24 films, which is pretty cool. Even outside of horror, like they have their own kind of indie vibe that seems to be. Even though among a bunch of different directors and stuff, there seems to be like a particular kind of like theme or style to their films where Yeah, you're like, oh, it's an A24 film. You know you're going to get something, kind of. My only, beef, which I mentioned before, was It Comes at Night was marketed as a horror film, but it wasn't. It was a survivalist drama and a really well-made film and really interesting, but it wasn't a supernatural horror film at all. So there was that. But yeah, this film is definitely akin to, it's got some kindred spirits in The Witch and a few other films I love. This one isn't necessarily celebrating evil or anything like that, but I do love the kind of current trend of taking things for granted as evil or a bad scenario, and then having it maybe not that way for certain characters. Maybe, man, and I love that. I love unhappy ending horror films and stuff. Not that's not quite where this one's going, but yeah, and when it does pay off, I was with it. I was into it for sure. But yeah, the performances were great because there's a lot of, there's not a lot of mood and shadow and color filters and everything to do a lot of the work for you. It has, it needs great performances to succeed, though there is also a lot of great music, and it really plays with the concept of diegetic music. What score, what's actual weird, Swedish bands playing this stuff on location, and it just kind of keeps fading that in and out. Creates a sense of uneasiness and instability, which is what these characters are going through. I loved it. It was pretty much exactly what I was expecting, except for the journey itself. I knew I was kind of expecting points A, B, and C, but it still threw enough curveballs to make it wholly satisfying, and is a little more uplifting than Hereditary, because Hereditary was rough, man. You're soaking in pure grief and intensity for a lot of that film. That film is almost up there with these big kind of gut-wrenching dramas that don't have any supernatural elements at all. So then you got that, and then the creepy horror on top of it. But this one's got its own thing. But Ari Aster is really, I hate to say it, all these new kind of directors that I should hate, like guys were Robert Eggers and Ari Aster, you want to write them off as these kids that are coming out of nowhere and don't have any knowledge of classic horror or anything like that. But they seem to be tapping into something, and it's a universal kind of vein of negativity, and they're, I don't know, harnessing it and doing some really fascinating things with it. Yeah, I dug it. So if you get a chance, check it out before it disappears from theaters. I'm sure it's going to be much like Hereditary. It'll make a few bucks here and there, and it'll largely be a thing for streaming and Blu-ray and etc. But yeah, do yourself a favor if you are into that type of film. A slow burn film. If you love the original Wicker Man, that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely go check this out. Well, thanks for hanging out, and Suspiria too. I mentioned it definitely fits in nicely with the Suspiria remake too. So I forgot to mention that. Sorry. Anyways, thanks for hanging out. I'll check you guys later, and yeah, watch out for weird Swedish communes and whatnot. Unless they have free food, and in that case, have fun. Cheers.